chapter 4, and it's a very powerful passage. And I want to read this passage, and then, like I said, please feel free to comment. Let's begin. Therefore, we both labor and suffer reproach because we trust in the living God. Fill in the blank. But these things command and teach. Let no man despise your youth, but be thou an example, that's what you were bringing up, Pastor, of the believers in word, in lifestyle, in unconditional love, in spirit, in faith, in purity, till I come. Give attendance to reading, exhortation, to doctrine. Neglect not the gift that is in you, which was given you by prophecy with the laying on of the hands of the presbytery. Meditate upon these things. Give thyself wholly to them, that your profiting may appear to all. Then he says this: take heed unto yourself and unto the doctrine, with a definite article, categorical. Continue in them, for in doing this you shall both save yourself and those that hear you.
That's a great word.
Isn't that something?
Yeah,
Let's back into this. He says, take heed to yourself, and that's an individual responsibility. But then it says to the doctrine, or the categories of truth. You were bringing out something I think that was very important, Pastor, and that was that our individual faith, be holy, as you were saying, as God is holy. And I want that kind of orientation, that kind of relationship with Him as a believer. But then I have a corporate orientation, meaning now it's not that I have a personal victory, but that we have a corporate victory, which requires then my being rightly related to you as an individual believer. So when you're blessed, I'm blessed. That should be it, When
That's the
you go
mystery.
through
That's the mystery.
trials, then
Mystery revealed.
I should identify with that
Yeah.
and not compete.
Yeah.
But there's so much comparing and competition that we are experientially, not positionally, but we're fractured. There's enough churches in the city of Baltimore to turn that city upside down.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go to any city for that matter. There's enough churches in America for us to not have to say, why are these events happening publicly in a library, in a public library, children being taught, groomed. That's the technical word, and I believe that. And then, what it stirred me up in terms of this is that this is a handoff. This is Paul coming to a closing out of his life, his ministry, his calling, and he's passing on to Timothy, who's going to take the baton, and in leadership, and also in fellowship, the edification that takes place. So, what do you men have to say about this portion?
Well, think of just the first thing this is the last thing I want to say. The last thing.
Can we hold you to that, though?
Think of the mystery of the church it's great. It's been revealed now. It's been revealed, and that's the mystery of the body. Is amazing, and how it works together. We're knit together in the love of the body. But think of the problems that ignorance of the scriptures, ignorance of doctrine causes. For example, when you hear, be ye holy, even as I am holy. Okay? that, that conjures up some thoughts in people's mind. It conjures up different thoughts in people's mind. Someone might think, be holy? Does that mean I have to put on something on the outside? I have to act
Religious.
I have to act. I have to be perfect my outside, an outward man. But it doesn't mean that at all. It says it's the farthest thing from the truth. The truth is that holiness simply means that we're in our heart. We're separated. We're separated from the world, and we are available for God to use us. That's it. We're just separated from the world. We're separated unto Him for Him to use us as His vessel. A vessel. That's what it means. A clean vessel. It doesn't mean that I make myself perfect on the outside and compare myself to everyone else. That's where self-righteousness comes in, and that's where that's where the trouble starts, right there. But we're wrong with wrong thinking. But when you realize what it really is, you go, oh, that's holiness. You're drawing near to God, and in your inner man, your new man, and you're presenting yourself a living sacrifice for God to use. That's all. Here I am. Who said here I am? Here am I. Every time God called someone in the Old Testament, here am I. That's all they said. Here am I. Okay, now you're separated unto me. But in no way did it mean what people think it means today about becoming these holiness churches and stuff like that.
Well,
It's the
you're
farthest thing
talking
from the
about,
truth.
The difference between conforming
Yeah.
religiously
And being transformed,
to
yeah.
versus being transformed. But when Paul says, meditate, this is verse 15, meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly to them, that your profiting may appear to all. What is it that is outlined in that idea of profiting? Because this is what either is going to minister to you, encourage you, edify you, build you up. First and foremost, it relates to the fact that if I get a personal victory, it's not just for me. We tell the Bible college students, what you are getting here in Bible college is not just for you. It is for you. But at some point in reality, at some point in time, you're going to have to give this to someone else. You're going to have to communicate it. So get it with that mindset. I'm getting this. It's going to be for someone else. And then the whole idea of what? Meditate. We're going to, in our summer camp, one of the, I think it's the finals corporate. So Friday, we're going to talk about biblical meditation, because Eastern religions don't have it. They like the flag, they hijacked it, But for us, isn't this part of the meditative aspect?
I had a thought about, what you're asking, this will include that, but I think that first verse that you read, let no man despise thy youth, I think that is a big key right there. Let no man despise thy youth. But at the same time, and I'll be the first to admit this, I still carry my poor self-image around all the time. I still am carrying my, and it is all grace. And we're not saying it is not. But I think what Paul is saying is, okay, and then he goes on to talk about that even more. Let your profiting appear unto being an example. No, are you kidding me? Nobody wants to be like me. Are you kidding me? You know, like if anybody knew me, they wouldn't want to be like me. But really, like Paul, you have, like in other words, embrace, and here's what I'm thinking, this is my own take, embrace the grace to you that you're willing to display him. And it's not you, it's you're displaying the awesome God, you know, this awesome God. Then, you know, meditating on these things, we're doing that. I mean, we're okay with that, you know. You know, I got a lot of stuff, you know. I got a lot of knowledge and all that in front of somebody. Or do I want to take responsibility for something?
Wow.
You know, or do I want to be the guy? Or, you know, or I mean, I started. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. Last thought, I was in Indianapolis. Pastor sent me out there to. After I was there for 2 years and nothing happened, or something happened. I did not want that church to grow. Please don't please don't bring people in. Don't bring any people in, because I wouldn't know what the hell to do with them if they came. You know, I was shielded. And honestly, I'm just
Well, was it
being transparent.
Pastor Tom, what do you think about? I think a good example of that. I love that transparency would be.
I mean, I
would
wasn't
be
talking
Gideon.
about anybody else. I was talking.
Yet God's estimation of him was, he called him Almighty Man of Valor. So Gideon was like,
Who's that guy?
calling me that, but I'm nothing. I am nothing. But yet God is calling things that are. He's calling it the way he sees it. So there's the key. It's just keep on being, not just myself, but everything the way God sees it. As God sees it. When you live in how God sees it, you're flying high. When you but the second half of the verse, quicken me according to your word. So then it takes me out of that. And it will be that way until you go home. Until we go home, and that's why it says to help each other, you know, help each other along the way. We're always considering yourself. It says considering yourself lest you fall.
Yes. Well, you know, the idea of with our youth. I don't want to be that one out front, because that's, you know, we've seen, and I think the word is celebrityship in ministry. Yeah, and that's been switched out for leader. A real leader you don't see, but you see him by faith and you follow him. You know, we've got this idea that, you know, and for instance, so if a church were to grow, you know, does the pastor assume?
Once he does that, then
Well, then, but that's common practice today. You know that, you know, churches go out, they're looking for a lightning rod, somebody that's going to attract, you know, people according to good flesh, and but it's still flesh. But if we are talking about drawing people who really have already decided that they don't want to follow themselves, don't want to live as unto themselves only, then they're seeking after a relationship, the heart of God, that would please God. So John 3:30, I must decrease, he must increase. Or is it the other way around? He must increase, yes.
yeah, then when
And then I
Corinthians talks
decrease.
about no flesh glorying in God's presence. He chose not many noble, not many wise, but he chose the foolish things of the world to glorify him. And bottom line, it says he went from the least in his family, and the least in his tribe, to giving God glory with the sword and the pitcher, and the enemy and the enemy surrounded it. It was a supernatural event.
Yes, what did they shout at the enemy? Is out, like what are you guys saying?
But you see the way that God whittled, there were like, what, 20,000 men or 70,000?
30.
He whittled down
31.
he whittled down the group to 300 people. Just whittled that all away because they were
Who was going to get
the
glory?
testing, the water test. Who's afraid? Go home. Whatever. Because it would be God that did it. No doubt.
Yes, no
Isn't it,
doubt.
isn't the biggest challenge that we are looking to try to find within us something that is not there? And it's not until we come to the conclusion, Paul wrote about it in 2 Corinthians 3, that we are living epistles, we are letters of Christ. He says in verse 4, such confidence we have through Christ toward God, not that we are adequate in ourselves to consider anything as coming from ourselves, but our adequacy is from God, who also made us adequate as servants of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. So it's the life of the Spirit, or really the manifestation of Christ in our lives, that becomes then the source of everything that God calls us to do. So it's no longer anything within us.
That's
It is Him, and therefore it is our development gives it to me that I'm going to count on Him showing up, because I am not adequate and never will be. But that's okay. There's strength in knowing. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 12 that when I am weak, that's when I'm strong. Why?
strong.
Because my strength, his strength is perfected in my weakness. That it's approaching Him on the basis of, I have nothing to offer you, Lord, in a place where we're suffering. Suffering is an important part of our walk with God, because it keeps us, just like Paul was saying, with the flesh, the thorn in the flesh. 2 Corinthians says yourself. This is your problem, is that either you're insecure about who you are, or you are too much filled with yourself. And that was Paul's problem. He was self-righteous. And so God had, Dr. Lewis used to sing, it's me again in trouble, and to me, that's where this reality is. And Paul is lamenting to Timothy that, hey, you have received, and persevere in it.
By faith,
and
which
you
gives no evidence by sight. See, I don't know something, and to me, it just seems to go 2 feet and fall to the ground.
Yep.
But then somebody remembers it 20 years later. Like they say, something you told me back, and I'm thinking when was that? Or what was that?
Yeah.
Before you were a graybeard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that was somewhat of the message last week that you allowed me to preach. It's the biggest enemy we have, this side of heaven, self-dependence. Whenever we depend on ourselves, we fall. Reckon yourselves to be what?
Dead indeed.
Dead.
Indeed.
When I reckon myself to be dead, it's like the best time in my life.
Seems Timothy needed
Because he's-
to not give in to this timid self. So the passage seems to be doing more of that, of encouraging him, that he has support of the elders, that he's being prayed for, that he's anointed, but that anointing is to flow from him, not be frustrated in him. It seems he's being encouraged to continue in the work that has begun. And Timothy almost complete opposites in their approach to ministry. Paul is more outgoing, and Timothy is more laid back, and he's saying to him, no, may have entered ministry younger than most, but God is using you and you're sharing the gospel. You will see it work in the lives of those around you. You will see that work and come alive in those around you. To progress forward and not be passive in the sense of ministry, but again, to slow down and lead, but so in your connections with everybody else. That in verse 16, pay close attention to your life and this is the
Translation.
life and your teaching. Persevere in these things, for in doing this, you will save both yourself and your hearers. Now, not saying that in that work by attaching to what God has done, that the sanctifying work in him is going to it's an encouragement. He seems to be someone that needs encouragement, even though he knows, but he needs a word that he can refer back to. Yeah, years later, maybe not at this moment, but he's going to have to recall these things when he's being progressing in the way that I thought they would progress, or slower than I thought they would progress. And you don't doubt the call, but you can doubt. Maybe you didn't do what God said, but you wondered, were you listening to God or were you listening to yourself? It may have been noble what you wanted, but was it blessed? Was it holy? And were you carrying out a holy? That for me, the encouragement of pastors has been a blessing to recall. What has been shared previously is something that continues to feed my heart as I agree with God, press forward in the light, but also recognize whose hand is on you. The Lord's hand is on you. And there are those who place their hand on you in agreement with God. Shouldn't be slowed by sometimes our sight and even
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I think it's also important too, but under conviction. Conviction is good. Condemnation is from the devil. Conviction is from the Holy Spirit to bring us so we're fruitful again, to bring us to a place of what we call confession, confessing to Christ, confessing and allowing the blood of Christ to cleanse us from all of whatever unrighteousness there was and get right back in the flow again. If we don't do that, we'll event it, because let's say we commit the same thing over and over and over again, you get to a place where you go, the voice is going to come and go, that's if to Christ he cleansed me from all unrighteousness. It says it right there in the Bible.
It does.
And it also says there's no condemnation either.
It does.
And so that's agreeing with God.
But that's faith. I mean, Pastor, you're hitting
Happy
on
is the man.
Somebody could read that and of God in what? Vanity, emptiness, without a purpose. So those who say, you preach grace as a license to sin. No, that's receiving the grace of God in vain. Right. Without the purpose of us being converted. But like you're saying, so I failed, again, in that same area, but now I come under condemnation. Like I could face it previously and maybe I had a stretch of good time without that failure, but no, I failed again. Now I condemn myself. So why? Because I have the evidence by sight that I'm not what I am believing by faith.
Maybe you haven't put on the helmet of salvation.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it doesn't come
There's
off.
warfare, there's warfare there. In other
True,
words,
I mean, that's, the
The devil wants to,
mindset.
the devil wants to decommission us
Decommission, wow.
from service. And how best to do that, but to think that we're just not worthy, or we're not, we don't have anything to offer God.
And maybe that's why people become lascivious, make it. They can't make it because they're under condemnation. So rather than come to Christ and confess their sins, they become lascivious. And usually say, forget it. I'm
They
just gonna do whatever.
capitulate,
Then
yeah,
everything's
they
okay.
run up the white
Everything's
flag.
okay. God understands.
Oh,
Well, the Bible says that he will never leave us or forsake us, right? So, if we sail, and really sail big time, God never says, well, I'm done with that guy, I mean, you can't use him. He never says that. He has, we go to plan B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever, how many plans it takes. But I believe, and this is, how are we ever going to see it? How are we going to ever see the grace of God? How are we ever going to see it? How am I ever going to see enough grace to be able to continue in something, like without opting out? And frankly, in my personal life, God has used trials, those kinds, I don't call them suffering, I call them just training, God's training. We need to be trained. I need the hand of God to train me, and I need those eternal weights of glory to be added to my soul at the end of these trials. I need the conversion that Peter experienced at the end of his trial. Peter went through a sifting, never leave him, even if he left God, even if he denied Christ, there was grace for that. And the thing is, we need to know these things experientially. If we don't know them experientially, we go this far with God, and then we're at an impasse. And we don't know there's grace to even that, right? That's how we rationalize things. But then God has to show us, yes, there is.
Yes.
God could use, he can't, but Paul had to be convinced of that. And God did the convincing. God does that in the background of our lives. So I say that as an encouragement also to anybody, not you guys don't need that. I'm talking to myself mostly.
We're above that.
Talking, you guys are all above that. I need a God who does things without my cooperation, without my being aboard with that. I need him to still work in my life when I'm screwing up so bad. I don't even care about what, it's like, here's the way I am. Here's who I am. Yeah, guys, let somebody else do that. That's fine. That's great. That's how I am. That's why I need some deep work in my soul. I don't need any projects.
Okay.
I'm just didn't even care. I've a long time ago given up on all the rewards in heaven. I told God, hey, forget about the rewards I have. Just don't take away my salvation. I still want to be saved.
Well,
Yeah.
He writes the book, what's the title of that book, sir?
Which book?
The first one that you wrote.
I'll pay you back.
I'll pay you back.
the promise,
Reward.
The promise that you'll have tribulation in this world is
By the way, let me say something about that book. That wasn't me paying God back.
Philippians 4, I think addresses this. Not that I speak from want, for I